Well, it is an honor for me to get to be here, and I want to thank Scott for his kind words and Dr. Lowry for the opportunity to get to be here with you. I love Lipscomb. If I didn't love Lipscomb, I would not have my daughter here in school. And this is a place that just kind of grabbed us the second we came. We were in the middle of a bunch of campus visits. We were looking around at different places, and we had a whole agenda of places we were going to visit. And the first place we came was Lipscomb. It was going to be a 3-day trip to all these other places. And first day, Sadie looks at me and says, yeah, I think this is it. And it was good. And we felt it. And my son Sam was 14 at the time, and he sat out underneath the bell tower, and he watched every time people went in and out of classes. And he came up to me later and said, I think it's a great school. I said, what do you like? He said, the girls here are beautiful, you know. So he might be here in a couple years as well. So I got here at to campus at about 7 o'clock this morning. I got a parking spot about 10 minutes ago. and that's serious, all right? I drove around for 15 minutes. I am over by a ball field, and there is a pile of mulch in a parking spot. And it's not really a parking spot anymore, but there was half of a parking spot there. If you are a pharmacy student and you drive a black car, I just am apologizing to you right now, okay? Because I am like 2 inches away from you, okay? But I got my parking spot, and I am here, and I'm thrilled to be a part of your gathering today. Now, I grew up with the most overprotective parents in all the world. You might beg to differ and say, oh, you've never met mine. How many of you all feel like you had the most overprotective parents? Just put your hands up, okay? A lot of you all. I wasn't allowed to go to dances. Anywhere I went to play, I was only there for 15 minutes. Yeah, you can go. Sure, you can go. Yeah, you can go do whatever. Yeah, be back home in 15 minutes, okay? And the concept was that way, you know, you couldn't get in a whole lot of trouble. But what I found was my parents, whenever they would get exasperated and mad at me, they would say some very weird things. They would say things that didn't make a whole lot of sense. And your parents said the same thing, you know. Do you think the living room is a gymnasium? You know, well, if we put a goal up over there, we could turn it into, you know. You think money grows on trees? No, Mom, leaves. I understand this. They say all these weird things. Finally, I started writing down all the strange things that my parents said to me. Now, my mom, every toy I picked up with, she was convinced was going to poke my eye out, okay? Hey, don't run with that. Don't run with it. Why is that? I think it might poke your eye out. Hey, I could understand it with a bow and arrow set. I could understand it with a BB gun. But she said, don't play with that thing, it might poke your eye out. I said, Mom, it's a beach ball, you know? I mean, it really can't do it, all right? They would say strange things. I'd be saying something, tattling on my brother. Stop tattling on your brother. Stop tattling on your brother. If you don't stop tattling, I'm going to tell your father. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it, you know? Strange things would happen when we would be at the dinner table. Hey, Dave, eat your spinach. Oh, Mom, I really don't like spinach. Hey, eat your spinach. I really don't like spinach. If you eat your spinach, you can grow up and look just like Popeye. Well, that's the dream of every American male, you know? Gosh, I'd love to look like Popeye, you know? Sometimes I'd be at the table and I would be a little bit too talkative. I'd be kind of a chatterbox and talking too much. I know you find this amazing, but I'd be talking too much. Same thing would happen every time. My dad would say, shut your mouth and eat your food. Well, how are you going to do that, you know? Shut your mouth and eat your food. Having a hard time with that corn on the cob, Dad. But they would say strange things. I'd come in the middle of the summer, it'd be 95 degrees outside. I'd leave the front door open. Air conditioner would be on. My dad would be in the lazy boy chair. He'd look up at me. He would bark and say, boy, were you born in a barn? I've often wondered if Joseph ever said that to Jesus. Yes, Dad, I was. Oh, well, just keep it open then. You know, I don't know what you say then. My favorite would be when they would be trying to get me to go mow the lawn. And my mom would say, hey, you need to go mow the lawn. I said, Mom, you know, I'll do it after the show's over, okay? You need to go mow the lawn. You really need to mow the lawn. Finally, I would get up, I'd go outside, start the mower, and she'd say, what are you doing? Where do you think you're going? I said, well, you said you wanted the lawn mowed. You are barefooted, young man. What are you doing? If you go out there barefoot, that lawnmower will cut your legs off. Now, granted, a lawnmower could do some serious damage, all right? But I mean, it really could hurt you badly, but it really can't cut your legs off. But my mom, when she gets exasperated and frustrated, that's what she's going to say. Oh, Mom, it can't do that. Okay, Mr. Smart Guy, go on out there, mow that lawn barefooted. But when that lawnmower cuts your legs off, don't come running to me. We'd all agree that there are some rather strange statements, but as we mature, we know what they meant. So let me share with you some seemingly strange statements which on the surface don't make a whole lot of sense. The greatest among you will be the servant of all. Whoever wants to save his life must lose it. Whoever loses his life for me will find it. How about this one? For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Sounds kind of backwards. Which leads me to this one. We'll put it on the screen. Luke chapter 19, verse 10. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. What was that about? God becomes flesh and he announces his mission statement. And surprisingly, it's not about self-promotion or building some personal empire. His concern is for those who are spiritually unhealthy. His desire is for those who are overlooked. He was consumed with leaving the 99 who were in the fold and rescuing the one who wasn't. And while on the surface that might seem strange to you, it gives you a clear indication of what was most important to the Lord. He came to seek and to save what was lost. This semester, you've been talking about how the kingdom is near. And you've heard a lot of different messages. You've heard a lot of different takes on that. But there's no question that the kingdom is near and that the kingdom is here. And yes, Christ is coming again, and we need to be prepared for that. But there's so many things that are taking place in the life of this school. There's so many things that are taking place in the lives of churches all around the country. Last night, I put out a tweet on my Twitter account that in Louisville, Kentucky, where I'm from, at the natatorium at the University of Louisville, last night they had 140 people come. You know why? There were 30 female athletes that got baptized last night. Is that awesome? The kingdom is near. The kingdom is here. The Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost. He's making a difference in people's lives right now in 2011. Jesus, when he ascended to heaven, he says in Acts 1:8, he says, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses. And he starts here and he says, in Jerusalem and in all Judea and in Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And that's what we're seeing take place. Now, my guess is that 90% of you all that I'm speaking to today are believers who have committed your life to Christ. And I want to speak directly to you. And I want to challenge to those of you who possess Christ in your heart to look for opportunities to share him with others. And for the other 5 or 10% who you're here, but you're not really certain if you're really sold out to Christ, I invite you to listen in on this conversation. And I pray that your heart will soften and that you'll make a commitment. I want us to see 3 lessons from how Christ interacted with others. The first is that he looks for the lost. He looked for the lost. Jesus gives us a lot of examples of looking for the lost. In Luke 19, right here in this passage where it says, Son of Man came to seek and save what was lost, he sees someone, a little man who climbed up a sycamore tree. Jesus calls him by name and he says, hey, let's do lunch. He says, in fact, let's do it today. In fact, let's go to your house. And he calls Zacchaeus by name, and Zacchaeus becomes one of his followers. Christ looked for the lost. We could talk about his encounter with people like Nicodemus that leads up to John chapter 3, verse 16 that you're well acquainted with. Jesus was constantly on the lookout for people who were open to spiritual lessons. In Matthew chapter 23, it tells that he weeps over the city of Jerusalem because he wants them to be united with the Lord. Please understand, Christians are no better than unbelievers. The difference is that Christians have swallowed their pride and admitted their need for someone to save them. John chapter 14, verse 6, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And if you don't believe that people who reject that Jesus Christ is the Son of God will spend eternity experiencing separation from God in a place called hell, then why bother to share with them about Jesus? I mean, What's the point? But look for those opportunities. Be intentional. Have a sense of controlled urgency. The Bible says in Hebrews 9, it says, it is appointed for man once to die and then face judgment. You see, choice, not chance, will determine your eternal destination. And Christ will return someday, and perhaps it will be today. Back in May, you may recall an eccentric preacher who was around 90 years of age. His name's Harold Camping, who predicted that Jesus Christ was going to return. You remember hearing all about that? Y'all remember that? A lot of people talking about it, and this guy really gave Christianity a bad name because he was saying, Jesus is going to return in May, and he had it all figured out, and Christ didn't get the message, evidently. But the guy was so convinced of it. Some of you may be old enough to remember that back in September of 1988, there was a gentleman by the name of Edgar Weisnett, and he was convinced that he had calculated exactly when Jesus Christ was going to return. He even printed a booklet called 88 Reasons the Rapture Will Occur in 1988. And many disillusioned followers sold all of their belongings, and because of his prediction that Christ would return on September 10th, 11th, or 12th. Now, at the time, I was working at Cincinnati Christian University in the administration there, and as you can imagine, at a Christian college, everybody thought it was very funny that Edgar thought he knew when Christ was going to return, but Jesus himself wasn't sure when. So we kind of got a kick out of that. But I'll never forget, after the 10th, 11th, and 12th came and went, I came onto campus on the 13th, and I talked to some students on my way to my office, and I said, can you believe it? We didn't get raptured. Jesus didn't come back. And these guys said, oh, you didn't hear? Edgar Weisnett went on national radio and television this morning, and he said he was off on his calculations by one day. He said, the Lord is going to return between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time this morning. I said, this guy won't let it rest. Well, I said, the students, did they hear about this? He said, at breakfast, everybody in the cafeteria, everybody was buzzing about it. So I went to my office and I thought, I can do some work or I can have some fun with this. Guess which I chose? So I called up our facilities department and said, you got a long rope or a pulley system or something? And they said, yeah, we got something like that. So I needed it up in my office in a little bit. And then I got the little booklet that said 88 Reasons the Rapture Will Occur in 1988. Then I called up two guys who played the trumpet. And I said, would you meet me up at my office a few minutes before 10 o'clock? I said, what for? I said, I just need you. Okay, all right, Dave, whatever you need. Then I talked to the professor that was on the top floor of the highest building at Cincinnati Christian University. And I said, hey, when you start your class, will you do me a favor? I said, will you say I'm going to take roll at the start of class, I'm going to take roll again at the end of class, and I'll see if any of you all get raptured. I said, just kind of plant a seed and have some fun with it. I said, do me one more favor. I said, open your side window over that faces out there. And he said, what do you want me to do this for? I said, just do it. Don't worry about it, all right? So at 10:05, I've got a rope and a pulley system all through my pants, and I have got two guys up on top of the roof, and they are holding onto this very long rope, and I've got my two trumpet players right beside me. So at 10:05, I gave them the signal, and they pointed their trumpets right up in the air, right in the direction of the open window. They started playing, when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. And so it's blaring away, but the only problem was when they started playing the trumpet, and I gave them the signal, the two guys up top, one of them thought that was their signal to start pulling. So one guy starts pulling, and he starts pulling me up. So now I'm being raptured, but I'm going up sideways, okay? So I'm going up sideways. I get about 6 feet up in the air when the other guy up top realizes, I must have missed my cue. And so he starts pulling feverishly at the same time that the first guy realizes, I pulled early. So one is letting out the slack, the other guy is jerking it, and the rapture nearly became the rupture, all right? Well, they got me evened out, and they're banging me up against the wall. I mean, I'm just getting beaten to a pulp by this brick wall. And I go sailing eventually past their window, and as I go past this window, here are dozens and dozens of students with eyes as big as saucers. And I've got my arms up, and I've got the little 88 Reasons book here, and I said, I'm coming home, Jesus! I said, I'm coming home. I don't know why they're not, but I'm coming home, Jesus. Well, they pull me the rest of the way on up, and there's some kids that were skipping class, and they were out there, cheering for me. Kids that skip class will cheer for just about anything, So they drag me over the top and everybody's cheering and they pull me over the lip. These two guys are sweating profusely. I mean, they are drenched after carrying all this dead weight, and they pull me over the top, and I'll never forget it because after about 2 minutes, one of them starts to say something, Jim Stanley. Jim looks at me and goes, he says, "Hey, Stone," he said, "did you ever think what might have happened if while we were pulling you up, we got raptured and you didn't?" And I looked back at him and I said, "Yes, I did think about that, and that's why I felt safe in choosing you." Yeah. Jim did not think it was that funny. Now, we should be skeptical of date setters. We can laugh about that. We can point out the theological fallacies of Wisen's beliefs. But the truth is there must be a sense of urgency because eternity hangs in the balance. And regardless of predictions and calculations, Jesus reminds us of the truth when he said, "No one knows the day or the hour." You see, knowing that he is coming is more important than knowing when he is coming. And so we're not consumed with anxiety. We are prepared with anticipation. And we are sharing our faith with others because heaven and hell are real places. And some people say, "Oh, I mean, come on, Dave. I mean, hell is a concept that was conjured up by preachers to guilt trip people into good behavior and to help their church attendance." But the Bible only spoke of this eternal place of torment even one time. We would have to believe it and accept it. But the Bible doesn't speak of it once. It mentions it 54 different times in the Bible. And you know who spoke more about it than anyone else. Our loving, gentle shepherd, Jesus Christ. In fact, he went to some incredible lengths so that you and I would never have to see a place called hell. You see, most people don't need to be told they're going to hell. They need to be shown how to get to heaven. And that's where you come in. You will never reap a harvest if you never plant a seed. So look for the lost. Secondly, listen to the lost. Listen to them. Jesus is on the outskirts of his neighborhood. The disciples have gone into town. Jesus finds himself at the town well where a woman is drawing water. And at that time, men rarely talked to women. And women didn't have any rights. And on top of that, a Jew never spoke to a Samaritan. And their prejudice went deep. But in John 4, not only did Jesus talk to this woman, but more importantly, he listened. And here was this Jewish man having a conversation with this Samaritan woman. But Jesus doesn't do all the talking. He listens. And the key to sharing your faith with those people who are far from Christ and have no relationship with him is just to listen to them, to hear their beliefs, to hear their doubts. It will allow you to focus your prayers and your conversations. Ask questions to reveal where they're coming from. You know, when I started talking about this topic of sharing your faith with other people, there are some of you that literally in your hearts you started to tense up because you are paralyzed at the prospect of sharing Christ with someone. They might turn you down. Yeah, Jesus was turned down by the rich young ruler when he shared faith with him. They might laugh at you. Yeah, you might be ridiculed. Christ died on a cross. I might not have all the answers. Most people aren't looking for a know-it-all. They're not looking for a paid professional whose mouth moves on cue. They're looking for someone whose faith is real. It's who they are. What if you began to pray by name for that coworker who gets on your nerves, or that relative who ridicules you for attending a Christian university? What if you began to pray for that person with whom you run into every time you work out at the Y or wherever it is that you might go, who expresses no faith whatsoever? You know, that's the challenge, is for us to listen to their needs, to get involved in their life. And maybe they will try to get your attention by saying, "You know what, I can't believe that you go to Lipscomb. By the way, what's it like?" Or it's a worker at the coffee shop who you see twice a week, and as she hands you your Frappuccino, she bluntly announces, "You know what, nobody cares about me. Maybe nobody cares about me." And you think, where in the world did that come from? And she says it to see if you care, to see if you'll listen, to see if you believe that there's a God who could specifically care about her. Listen to the comments at the ball game. Read between the lines in the emails. Listen to those things which may be obstacles in having faith. Listen to the lost. Listen to their hopes, their hurts, their fears. God will bring people into your path. Your job is to plant the seeds, but you'll never reap a harvest if you never plant a seed. Look for the lost, listen to the lost, and finally, love the lost. The highest motivation for sharing your faith is love. As you do life here in the Nashville area, you must see your role as being representative of Jesus Christ. Christ said in John 13:35, he said, "By this all men will know that you are my disciples, by your love one for another." You say, but the way my boss acts, it is repulsive. Or the taunts and the barbs that people say about my faith, they're downright brutal. How could I ever love a person who acts like that? I love what Joe Aldridge says. He says it like this. He says, "Remember, non-believers are not the enemy. They are victims of the enemy." That's what they are. They're victims of the enemy. Why be surprised? And those who are unfamiliar with the gospel story desperately need some hope. And their guilt is getting the best of them, and their sin baggage is bogging them down. And when you extend grace and share with others of God's love, it can transform people. All you're doing is just sharing the difference that Christ has made in your life. That's all you do. And to show love, it requires both grace and truth. And Jesus Christ modeled the way in this when he spoke with the woman in John 8, the woman caught in the act of adultery. And Jesus told the crowd, "Hey, whoever's without sin, start chucking." And slowly, one by one, they dropped their rocks of righteousness, intended to stone the lust out of her life. And they walked away and they left. And Jesus facetiously says, "Isn't there anyone left to accuse you?" "No one, sir," she says. And then he says, "Then neither do I condemn you." But he doesn't stop there. He goes and gives her grace, but he follows it up with truth. He says, "And neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." That's truth. That's grace combined. And it's time for all of us to do our part to share our faith with others. I know in just a few minutes you're going to walk out, you're going to scan your card. I understand how this thing works. I was talking to my daughter about it. I said, so when do they get credit for being in the gathering? She said, "Oh, they don't get credit until they walk out." I thought, that is very smart, all right? I understand how that works. But what if at the little Scantron doohickeys all around, when you head out, what if I was standing right there and I said to you, "Could you give me 2 or 3 names of people that you're trying to share your faith with?" Would you have any names? Patrick works at a restaurant. Jody works at a golf course. Chad and Amy are going through a really rough time, and they need the Lord right now in the middle of their marriage. Mike and Christy, a fractured relationship that only Christ can heal. Can I tell you something? Lost people need you to be involved in their life. Perhaps you heard about the couple who went shopping with their 5-year-old son, and through the course of time, they got a little bit more interested in the clothes and the items that were there at the store than they did keeping an eye on their son. And their 5-year-old kind of started looking around, moving different places. And after about 10 minutes, one of the parents thought that the child was with the other one, and they said something, "Well, no, I think he's around here somewhere." And they started kind of looking for him casually. Well, they couldn't find him. 10 minutes became 15 minutes, and they said something to the store clerks, and they said, "Hey, we can't find our 5-year-old son." And so now store clerks got involved in the action, and they started radioing to different departments, and another 10 minutes passed, and it was at that point where the mom just had this sinking feeling in her heart, and she thought, "My son has been abducted. I will never see him again." It was at that moment that over the loudspeaker, a voice said, "Would Mr. and Mrs. Bernard Johnson please report to the manager's office on the 2nd level?" And both parents went bounding up the escalator steps, and they found the manager's office, and they threw open the door, and there, seated back behind the manager's desk, with his feet propped up, sipping on a cold Coke, having the time of his life with a big smile on his face, was their 5-year-old son. But as soon as the 5-year-old saw the worried and frantic expression on his parents' faces. His smile immediately gave way and he burst into tears. Do you realize why? He had no idea he was lost until he was found. And there are hundreds and thousands of people who you cross paths with each and every day, and they do not have a clue. They have no idea that they are heading for a Christless eternity. And to think that you as a 19-year-old, as a 21-year-old, could go out of your way and somehow introduce them to the person of Jesus Christ through the way you love them and the way that you listen to them. There's no greater feeling. When I get to that wonderful city and the saints all around me appear, I want to have somebody tell me, it was you that invited me here. In Mark chapter 1, verses 40 through 45, Jesus heals a man with leprosy. He gives a rather unusual request of him, though. Can you imagine that? Everywhere this man went, he was relegated to a life of shame and embarrassment. His wounds oozed. He couldn't be in public without having bells or different things around his neck that would make some type of noise. Everywhere he went, he had to shout out, unclean. And now all of a sudden, in an instant, Jesus Christ touches him, and the man is dramatically, physically transformed. And then Jesus says to him, don't tell anybody. And you know what the guy does? He tells everybody. He can't keep it quiet. He tells everybody. Now, I'm not condoning his disobedience, but here's my point. He was told to shut his mouth. You have been told to open yours. What on earth are you doing for heaven's sake? When was the last time that you said a good word on behalf of Jesus Christ to someone else? You know, after this service is over, there's a room that you can go to and you can talk with someone. There might be some of you here who have never committed your life to Jesus Christ, and maybe today's the day for you. There's a whole lot of us in here who need to step it up when it comes to sharing our faith, though. And I hope that you'll think of some names and you'll think of some faces, but more importantly than that you'll do something about it. May this be the phrase that describes your life. I'm just a nobody trying to tell everybody about somebody who can save anybody. Let's pray.